Her family sold her as useless, until a lonely mountain man built her a cabin and at last called her wife. The deal was struck in the open air. No shame in it, no pause. The old man clutched the sack of coins like it was worth more than blood. The girl stood barefoot, wrists loose at her sides, eyes cast down. She didn't protest. She had learned long ago that her voice carried no weight in her own house. The mountain man stood apart, taller than both, the sun on his bare shoulders, a pelt thrown over his back. His hands were calloused, knuckles scarred from stone and axe. He didn't bargain. He didn't argue. He set the coins down heavy enough to end talk. The family turned and left without a look. Dust clung to their boots, fading down the path. The girl watched them until the trees swallowed them whole. When she turned back, the man was already walking, expecting her to follow. She did. The path wound upward through pine and rock. The air thinned, clean, sharp. She stumbled once, caught herself on a root, but he didn't slow or offer a hand. He carried nothing but an axe strapped to his hip and a coil of rope slung across his chest. His silence was a wall, but it wasn't cruel. It was the kind of silence that had lived alone too long. By dusk, they reached a clearing. A half-built cabin stood, logs stacked, roof not yet closed against the sky. Smoke stains darkened one side where a fire had been tried and left. A stream cut the edge of the clearing, water cold, fast, sure. He pointed to the cabin. Yours, he said. One word. Low, rough. She stepped across the threshold. No door yet, no floor, but packed earth. Still, it was more than she'd ever been given. She ran her hand along the log wall, splinters biting, and felt something stir she couldn't name. That night, he lit a fire outside. Cooked meat on a flat stone, passed her a piece without looking. She ate slow, warmth filling her chest more than her belly. He sat across, the flames cutting shadows across his face. He didn't speak again. She didn't either. The crackle of wood was enough. Above them, stars stretched wide. She lay on the earth, wrapped in a thin blanket he had thrown her way. The forest whispered, and for the first time, the whispers weren't cruel. The first mornings on the mountain came cold, sharper than valley air. She woke to breath white in the dawn, to the sound of an axe splitting wood outside the unfinished cabin. The mountain man had already been at work before the light found them. She pulled the blanket tight, rose, and stepped barefoot onto the hard earth. Her toes numbed quick, but she didn't go back. She stood at the doorway without a door, watching him swing the axe. Each strike was clean, measured, final. Chips of pine scattered at his feet. His body worked as if it had been built by the same ground he split, muscle set to rhythm instead of words. He glanced once, saw her there, then set another log upright. He said nothing. She said nothing. When the pile grew, he set the axe aside and carried logs to the frame of the cabin. He pointed at a stack near the wall. She understood, picked up a smaller piece, and followed. Her arms trembled under the weight, but she carried it inside, set it where he nodded. No praise, no correction. Just the first work she had done that wasn't for those who called her useless. By midday, the roof took shape. He lashed beams together with rope, drove pegs with the back of his axe. She fetched, carried, steadied when he lifted one end and needed the other held. Her hands blistered, skin soft from years of neglect. She bit down on the sting and didn't stop. He saw, and once without a word, he cut a strip of hide, wrapped it around her palm, tied it neat. That night the fire burned brighter, contained now by walls. Smoke lifted through a hole he had cut in the roof. She sat close, the heat new against her face. He passed her meat, coarse bread, and let her eat in peace. He chewed slower, eyes half on her, half on the fire. When she lay down, she used the hide strip as a pillow for her sore hands. The cabin no longer felt like an unfinished box of logs. It felt like a place where breath could last until morning. The days after followed rhythm. He rose before dawn. She woke soon after, swept ashes, fetched water from the stream. He cut timber, shaped beams, mended what weather had taken. She learned to follow his pace, not with words, but with the movement of his hands. She found berries near the stream, brought them back in her skirt, set them on the table they had built together from rough boards. He ate one, nodded once. It was the first sign that her presence had added more than labor. At night, she listened to the mountain, owls hunting, branches groaning, the rush of the stream. He sat sharpening his blade, the sound steady, like a heartbeat not her own. Sometimes she caught him watching her, not with hunger, not with suspicion, but with a question he hadn't chosen to ask. One evening, a storm rolled down from the ridge. Wind shoved the cabin walls, rain hammered the roof. She curled in a corner, arms tight. He stood by the doorframe, steady as stone, watching the weather try to break what they'd built. The roof held, the walls held. When morning came, the clearing was soaked, but the cabin stood strong. She stepped outside, rain dripping from her hair, mud sucking at her feet. He pointed to the cedar ridge. Together they climbed. From there she saw the valley far below, the fields where her family had left her. Smoke rose faint from their chimney, a thin mark against the sky. She didn't speak. She only watched until her throat tightened, then turned away. He led her back without a word. At the stream, she knelt and washed mud from her arms, from her face, until the water carried it off. He waited until she stood, then handed her a piece of pine he had carved during the storm. Small, rough, the shape of a bird. She held it, eyes stinging. It was the first gift anyone had given her that wasn't a burden. That night she placed the bird on the beam beside her cot. She touched it once before lying down. The mountain outside roared with crickets and cold air, but inside she felt a kind of quiet she had never known. The mountain didn't forgive idleness. Days bled into each other with work. The cabin walls thickened, the roof sealed, the smoke hole lined with stone. She learned to set snares by the stream, to split kindling with a hatchet, to scrub clothes against flat rock until her hands went raw. He said little, but he watched. When her grip faltered, he set a log smaller. When she carried too much, he shifted the load to his shoulder. His care came only through adjustments, never through words. The bird carving stayed on her beam. At night, she touched it once before sleep. It became her anchor, proof that she was no longer invisible. But one morning, smoke rose from below the ridge. Too much, too close. She froze at the sight, water pail still in her hands. He noticed, narrowed his eyes, then set down his axe. They stood together, silent, watching the column twist into the sky. By afternoon, voices carried, men climbing the path, louder than hunters should be. She recognized them before they appeared, her kin, the same faces that had sold her for coin, now coming for more. They reached the clearing bold, boots careless, eyes greedy. The old man in front grinned wide, the same grin that had sealed her fate weeks ago. "You built her a roof," he said to the mountain man, voice sharp as rusted tin. "Guess she's worth more now. We've come to collect the rest." The mountain man didn't answer. His hand rested on the axe haft. He stood tall, broad, unmoving. Her breath caught. She stepped behind him without thinking, fingers clutching the edge of his pelt. The gesture was small, but it said everything. The old man saw it and laughed. "So that's how it is? She thinks she's a wife now?" He spat in the dirt. "She was nothing when we gave her away. Nothing." The mountain man stepped forward once. The clearing tightened around him. "Go," he said. One word. Cold. Final. The men shifted. Some smirked. Others hesitated. They weren't used to being challenged. Not by silence, not by stone. The old man sneered. "You'll regret this. We'll come back with more." The mountain man didn't move, didn't blink. His stillness was heavier than any weapon. Finally they turned, muttering, and trudged back down the trail. Their threat hung in the air like storm clouds. She sagged against the wall, knees weak. He set the axe aside, glanced at her, then at the boy carving on the beam. His face didn't soften, but his hand brushed the wood once, the way a man steadies himself before speaking. "You stay," he said. Her throat tightened. She nodded. The days after carried a new edge. He checked the snares twice as often, strengthened the door with a crossbar of pine, dug a trench along the back wall in case fire came creeping through the grass. She worked beside him, no complaint, fear sharpening her hands. At night, she lay awake listening for steps on the trail. Sometimes she rose, crossed to the beam, and touched the bird, reminding herself that she wasn't being carried away again. She had been given a choice, even if it was just to stay. One evening, while he sharpened his blade, she spoke. Her voice trembled but didn't break. "They called me useless. That's why they sold me. He didn't look up. The whetstone kept its rhythm, but he listened. I cooked, I cleaned, I carried. Still, I wasn't enough. They said no man would call me wife. Not ever. Her hands gripped her skirt until the fabric creased. I believed them. The whetstone slowed, then stopped. He set the knife down, looked at her fully for the first time. His eyes held no pity, only truth. They were wrong, he said. The words were plain, but they struck deeper than any kindness she had known. She turned her face away, tears blurring the cabin fire. He didn't move closer, didn't try to touch her. He let the truth stand alone. Storms rolled down from the peaks. Rain hammered the roof, but the walls held. She lay awake, listening to thunder, the memory of threats stirring in her chest. Beside the fire, he sat with his axe across his knees, waiting. His silhouette was sharp, unyielding, and for the first time, she felt safe inside walls she had helped raise. When the storm passed, dawn washed the ridge clean. Smoke from the valley was gone, but she knew her kin would come again. Not for her alone, out of spite, out of greed. She carried that fear to the stream, to the fire, to her sleep. Yet she also carried his words. They were wrong, and each day she stayed, the cabin became less a shelter and more a promise. The mountain carried sound far. A crow's call echoed off the ridge. The swing of an axe traveled like a drumbeat. So when the trail below filled with heavy boots, they heard them long before the men appeared. She was kneeling by the stream, washing clothes against stone. Her hands froze in the water. She lifted her head, listening. Not thunder, not deer. Men. Too many. He stepped from the cabin, axe in hand, shoulders square. His eyes cut to her once, sharp, steady. She dropped the wet cloth, wiped her hands on her skirt, and moved quickly to his side. The first figures broke from the trees. Her kin, more than before, faces mean, mouths already twisting into jeers. The old man led them, coins spent but greed still gnawing. Behind him walked cousins, brothers, boys she had known as a child, now carrying rope and clubs. Well, the old man called, voice thick with triumph. Seems our useless one learned to scrub floors after all. And you, he jabbed a finger at the mountain man, owe us for the labor she's given. The mountain man didn't answer. His axe head gleamed with resin, his feet planted deep. The old man stepped closer, grinning. We'll take her back. Cabin, too. No reason a brute like you should keep both. She felt her throat close. For years she had been silent, sold without protest. But now she stepped forward, her voice breaking the air. I won't go. The men laughed. The old man sneered. You don't choose, girl. The mountain man raised the axe, not to swing but to show. His voice was low, iron pressed into syllables. She stays. The clearing tightened. Men shifted, uncertain. They had expected begging, fear, not stone. But numbers made them bold. Two stepped forward, rope swinging. She reached for the bird carving tucked at her belt. Small, rough, her anchor. Her hand closed around it, and courage filled her chest like breath. Enough, she said, louder now. You sold me. You lost me. I belong here. The words struck harder than the axe. The men stilled. The old man's face darkened. He spat in the dirt. Then you're no kin of ours. The mountain man stepped forward. His presence alone made three of them back away. He didn't need to swing. His silence carried weight heavier than iron. The old man cursed, turned, and signaled. One by one, the men followed, boots dragging, eyes avoiding hers. Their laughter was gone, replaced by something sharper. Shame, fear, maybe both. The clearing emptied. Only pine needles stirred. She sagged, knees nearly buckling. He set the axe down, steady, then placed a hand on her shoulder. Not possession, not command. Just enough to keep her standing. You're not useless, he said. Her chest broke then, tears spilling, not of sorrow but release. She leaned into his palm, eyes closing. For the first time she believed the words. The days after carried new peace. No smoke rose from the valley. No footsteps troubled the ridge. Together they finished the cabin, shutters on the windows, a door strong enough to hold against storms. She sewed curtains from old cloth, hung them where light poured through. He built a bed frame, rough but solid. She wove dried grasses into a mat for the floor. Each act bound her to the place, thread by thread. It was no longer a shelter, it was a home. At night they sat by the fire. He sharpened his axe. She mended clothes. Sometimes their hands brushed when passing tools. Neither pulled away. The silence between them softened. One evening, he set aside the axe, looked at her, and spoke plain. "This is yours now, not because of coin, because you stayed." She met his eyes. Her voice was steady, quiet. "And because you gave me more than chains." He didn't smile. He didn't need to. He only reached for the bird carving on the beam and set it in her hands again. "Wife," he said. One word, but it filled the cabin like a vow. She pressed the carving to her chest, tears hot against her cheeks, and nodded. Not bought, not sold, chosen. That night the mountain air was cold, but inside the fire held. She lay on the bed they had built, his pelt spread across them, the sound of the stream steady outside. For the first time in her life, the word wife did not mean burden. It meant shelter. It meant belonging. And the mountain kept them, silent, unyielding, but kind at last. Winter came early to the ridge. Snow drifted down the trail, soft at first, then heavy enough to close the valley behind them. The cabin stood firm against the wind, smoke curling steady from its chimney. Inside, the world was different. Curtains softened the light. A mat lay by the door where boots dried. On the shelf, jars she had filled with berries and roots caught what sun they could. The bird carving rested above the hearth now, a silent witness to every breath they shared. The mountain man rose before dawn, as always. He chopped wood until his breath smoked the air, then carried armloads inside. She met him with a bowl of broth, steam rising, the smell of herbs she had gathered herself. He took it without words, but his eyes lingered on her face longer each morning. The boy never came. There was no child yet, but in the way she moved, placing a blanket by the fire, brushing snow from his shoulders, humming softly when she thought he wasn't listening. There was already family. One evening, while the wind howled, she stitched by the fire. Her fingers worked slow but sure, mending a tear in his coat. He watched her from the rocker, axe across his knees. The sight of her bent over his coat, the lamp's glow on her hair, pulled something in his chest he hadn't felt in years. He set the axe aside, stood, and crossed to her. She stilled, needle midair. He took the coat from her hands, laid it on the table, then placed his palm over hers. Rough skin against skin. No force, no command, only choice. "You're not alone here," he said. His voice was low, unpracticed, but true. "You never will be again." Tears welled in her eyes, but she didn't look away. She turned her hand, laced her fingers through his, and whispered, "Husband." The word felt heavier than the chains she had once worn. Yet it didn't bind. It freed. The seasons turned. Snow melted. Streams swelled. The valley greened. They planted together in the small patch of earth by the cabin. She bent over rows he tilled with a crude hoe he had fashioned. When the first shoots broke soil, she laughed, a sound he hadn't known he'd missed until it filled the air. Her kin never returned. Perhaps fear held them, or shame. Perhaps the mountain itself kept them away. Whatever the reason, their shadow no longer darkened her doorway. She spoke their name less each day, until finally, not at all. By the second winter, the cabin was no longer just wood and stone. It bore their marks in every corner. Her stitches on curtains, his carvings on beams, the bird still above the fire, now joined by others he had shaped for her. Wolf, bear, deer. Each one a vow, cut from his silence. On the longest night, when the snow piled high, he laid a hand on her shoulder and simply said, "Wife." She turned, leaned into him, and whispered the word back, steady as a prayer. She had been sold as useless. She had been cast off like weight a family no longer wanted to carry. But here, on a mountain where storms ruled and silence tested every soul, she had been built into something stronger, not with chains, not with coin, with walls raised by two hands and a word spoken only when it meant everything. Wife. If this story touched you, don't forget to like, subscribe, and leave a comment. What moment struck deepest for you? The cabin built, the defiance of her kin, or the single word that changed her life.